Hello, good morning. I'm Addison David Lynch is alongside me again this morning to take a look at the latest Liverpool news. I'll be honest, there's not loads going on after that draw with Wolves at the weekend. We still don't know when that replay is going to be played either. I'm sure we'll find that out very soon. But there are a couple of transfer links that we're going to have a little bit of a talk through. Do let us know in the comments as we go what you want Liverpool to do. We'll try and get some of those on screen over the next sort of 10 or 15 minutes or so. And I suppose we'll start with a bit more of a general look at the midfield, Lynch. I mean, as we talked about on yesterday's podcast, one signing not necessarily enough to fix Liverpool this month, but it would certainly be preferable to no signings at all.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think you spot on really in terms of, I think there are quite a few issues around the team. And also, when you look at the midfield, there's structural problems there in terms of things that are happening. In terms of maybe it seems to be a lot of the time is throwing maybe one man extra forward, and that's causing issues in terms of they never really look protected. So it makes you think that there are some tactical tweaks that maybe need to be made if that midfield problem is going to sort itself. But that said, there are also issues in terms of legs in there and age and players maybe just slightly going past the best and simultaneously as well, and therefore that's causing a lot of problems. And you think that one of the routes to that solution there would be to dip into the transfer market. I think it's a slight mix of both tactical issues across the team and mixed form and maybe a lack of confidence at this point. But signing a midfielder feels like it would probably be the biggest first step towards a real solution and getting Liverpool back to being where they were last season.
Yeah, I think as much as anything, if they don't do anything this summer, this month, rather, they could just give themselves even more to do in the summer, which I think would probably be the best idea to kind of spread that out a little bit. But let's have a look at a couple of the names that are being linked then. Teun Koopmeiners is one that we've seen across the last few days. I mean, it doesn't sound from a lot of the reporting that Atalanta would be particularly keen to sell him this month. I think they've sold somebody else. I can't remember his name, but I think he went to Marseille in France. And so they don't particularly need the money. It's not one of those situations like it was with PSV and Cody Gakpo where they needed a bit of cash to come in. He has been linked before, though. Do you know much about him? What would your thoughts be on him?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I've seen a lot of Atalanta since that sort of couple of seasons where they were regulars in the Champions League and looked really threatening. And I suppose if they've maintained that style of football going forward, then you'd think that any player that would come from there would be a really good fit for Jurgen Klopp team, because that was a really sort of aggressive style of football, physical, pressing high and trying to score as many goals as possible. Really exciting to watch. So if Atalanta maintain that style of football, then any player from there would be a really good fit. So, Koopmeiners, saw a little bit of him in the World Cup and, looked a decent, versatile player as well. And Van Gaal obviously likes him a lot and used him quite nicely. So it's an interesting one. I saw a report yesterday that suggested that Atalanta weren't really particularly keen to sell in January. And I think there's going to be a lot of clubs who are in that position, if they've got themselves into a decent spot in the league, or they've got aims for the second part of the season, then selling some of your key men is probably not a good idea. And therefore, I think, if Koopmeiners is a key man at Atalanta, which I expect he is, then, they're probably not going to be keen on letting him go in January. And that really makes sense. That possibly does cut that route off for Liverpool. But you can see why they're being linked in terms of his profile, because he's 24 years old, I think. So just possibly on the cusp of his peak years. And that's sort of a bracket where Liverpool have made a lot of really good signings in recent years. So, you can make sense out of the link, but whether that's something they'll be able to pull off this month is difficult to say, really.
I think the one thing I do know about him is he's very much an attack-minded. He's a goal scorer. He's a player that does score goals from midfield, and that is something that a lot of people have been sort of crying out for over not just the last few months, but the last few years really at Liverpool. But it just kind of, whenever we look at these links, and there's been other players as well in central midfield who've been linked with Liverpool, they all seem to be completely different players. You think of someone like Sofian Amrabat is very much a number 6, doesn't really get forward a lot. Teun Koopmeiners seems to be at the other end of the spectrum. There's then been a lot of players somewhere between those two. It doesn't quite feel like there's a link of this is the midfielder that Liverpool wants. I almost wonder if step one to all of this is just to work out, well, what exactly is it that Liverpool want from their midfielder? Because each of these names, there's so many different bits to them. It's not like you can say, well, they're obviously looking for X type of player. It doesn't seem to be that there's any sort of pattern between these names.
Yeah, but then I suppose that speaks to the idea that, you know, a lot of the time transfer links are total nonsense, and there is no truth in them. You know, agents will be using the idea that Liverpool need a midfielder because it's widely known through European football that they're desperate in that position, and using it to generate interest in the clients. And that's why you'll end up with sort of a mixed match of all different types of profile, you know, none of whom really make sense together. Or why if you couldn't get X player, why would you go for Y? And I think that's really what's sort of going on here. You know, I think we all know really, in terms of if they were going to add someone in midfield, maybe an attacking midfielder probably wouldn't be the choice, because I think, you know, Liverpool, like I say, I think one of Liverpool's problems is that they're maybe throwing too many people ahead of the ball and not protecting the counter particularly well at the moment. So your ideal really would be a sort of Genie Wijnaldum type, really adept at filling in gaps, very good at keeping possession. I'm obviously thinking of maybe Moises Caicedo at Brighton, who's been linked very regularly. Looks like he'd be an ideal fit. But, you know, sort of my understanding at the moment is that Liverpool won't be making that move in January, or possibly any move at all, unless it's a really cut price move late in the window or something like that. So, I think that's certainly the profile they need. And I think Liverpool will know that. Like I say, I think, you know, it's a lot of it's agent talk. And I think Liverpool will have a good idea of what they actually do need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, let's move on to the second name we're going to talk about. A couple of comments around Yunus Musah. Again, one of those that did quite well at the World Cup. I have to say, I hadn't really seen him before that. Looked decent, but I think that the big thing that would stand out with those links is he's only 20. He may well be on Liverpool's radar. In fact, I'd be surprised that at that age to be doing what he's been doing for his national team and his club side as well. I'd be surprised if he wasn't to some extent, but whether he's going to come in and be the solution this month, I'd be very surprised.
Yeah, that's it. You'd say his age would discount him from being one that comes in and makes an instant impact and drags Liverpool to where they want to be, which is possibly something that would discourage them from signing him. But he does have the pedigree, doesn't he, in terms of maybe a long-term signing in terms of one that they maybe look at in the summer and say, you know, he's got real potential because he's playing at a high level at a really young age and got a lot of developing to do, but already done quite a lot of impressive things already. So sort of interested to see how that one develops. And I know Valencia, in terms of, you know, financially aren't doing too well and possibly would be on the side of a club that maybe does need the money. You know, as you mentioned with the Gakpo links earlier, it's, you know, that came about, that deal was doable because, you know, the club needed to cash in the NPSV. So, you know, Valencia, they'll be looking to sell Yunus Musah, I've no doubt. If not now, then maybe when the summer comes around. So it's possibly a deal there to be done if Liverpool think that he's one that could come in and sort of bridge the gap in terms of the midfield. So they, you know, do they need another younger body in there? But I'm sure, of course, that the likes of Harvey Elliott, Curtis Jones, and Fabio Carvalho would possibly have something to say about that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We've talked a lot sort of over the last few months around the age profile that Liverpool need. That there isn't that sort of in the middle. Naby Keita and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, probably the two that you'd say are in the sort of prime of their career, if you like, or certainly on paper. But both of those obviously out of contract. It does kind of feel to me like they need someone who's a bit more of the Koopmeiners, 24, 25, that kind of age. That kind of feels like the more likely option than a younger or even an older player, but they don't tend to go for those anyway.
Yeah, 100%. It's someone who comes in and is, you know, like I say, yeah, it's that Koopmeiners age bracket, isn't it? Because it is just on the cusp of hitting into your peak years then. And I think that's where Liverpool are sort of lacking at the moment. And I mean, it's sort of difficult, isn't it, really? Because would you say then that Jude Bellingham wouldn't be a good signing? I suppose the argument there is that he is a player who, despite his tender years, he plays at a level that is far, far above his age range and with a maturity of that level as well. You know, he's got his head screwed on. You know, we've seen the way he deals with other players around him, the way he sort of motivates players around him. He plays, he's got the mentality and the mindset of a player who's much older. So I think, you know, Liverpool will maybe look at him as a sort of exception in that case. But, you know, outside of that, you know, we know they're going to need at least two midfielders. I think if the other one was more in the age bracket 23, 24, that would make people feel a lot more comfortable. I think that's something Liverpool will target because, there's just too big a gap from the likes of Elliott and Carvalho then up to Jordan Henderson and Thiago and Fabinho. It's, they really need to sort of have something in the middle and sort that profile out generally in the summer. And I think that's something they will look to do as well, because I think they appreciate that you've seen at the moment that you've just had too big of a mix of players whose physicality is perhaps weighing in, and then matching them up with players who just don't have the experience yet. And that's a bit of a recipe for disaster, and part of the reason that Liverpool have had so many problems in the centre of the park.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, with the age thing? I think you almost have to judge Jude Bellingham as kind of how many seasons has he played rather than how old is he. If he's done, what will it be, 2 or maybe even 3 seasons of Champions League football? Maybe you judge him on that rather than anything else. But certainly be interesting to see what they do moving into the rest of this window first, but then into the summer as well. But I think we'll leave it there for this morning. We'll have, of course, all the latest news and any other rumours as they arrive this month all across Liverpool.com. We'll be analysing them on these morning streams as well, so do continue to check these out. Much more to come throughout the week, I'm sure, but for now, we'll see you later.